thanks for inviting me here as well, and thanks for the previous presentations that were really informative and very nice for an architect who is working on the field. So my perspective is a bit different, of course, because I'm on the field trying to do the job and solve the problems that I'm asked to solve. And what usually comes in front of me on the plate is a client who wants a new building, and they say, I want a museum for an old ship, or I want a spa near Bucharest in Romania. And then you can't recycle anything because it needs to be a new building, and I could say no also, of course, but that's not an option for a company that tries to employ people. And so we have tried to recycle and successfully recycled materials in a couple of projects, especially with students. So two of my main strategies based on my interest in history and handcrafts. I was trained as a modernist contemporary architect, and I even worked with contemporary art for a moment. And so it's a kind of long jump to become somebody who loves history and such. But what we have realized with our projects so far is that it's very hard to recycle at the moment because there's no material available. And if we even take down one building, which we did once because it was a doomed building that had to go, we took it down and recycled it in an interior of a shop. It became extremely expensive for the client, and they said, we will never do this again. So it's a kind of bad advertisement for that. So we have to learn how to do it in an effective way, and what Pasi is doing now, mapping the material, will help us a lot in future. But I thought I'd just take a kind of philosophical, artistic look on the matter instead, because what we are trying to do with history of architecture or mankind or social anthropology in my head is to recycle the ideas, to understand why people made this kind of buildings or structures, and try to do it again, because it's a little bit like in cooking that sometimes the best food is really simple and made of the local materials. You don't do much with them. You maybe salt the fish and smoke it, and it becomes fantastic. You don't need to invent the wheel again. And even some mathematicians say today that our society has become so complex that please, whatever you do in your professional life, try to simplify your doing and your results a little bit, because we are just complicating them so that soon it's impossible to govern our societies and solve our problems. They become more and more wicked because we are doing so complex things. I have a nice, this is our office, by the way, coming from Finland and Iceland, Ragur and me, and then we live in Norway and have offices in Oslo and Bodo. Yeah, so it's a very big question for me, so it's very difficult to squeeze it into 30 minutes, this whole thing. But if you don't remember anything else of this lecture, just remember this, what I say with these two next slides, or three, is that like it's been told, we are making a new city part in Bodo, and this will or will not be recycled partly, or will not have a traditional knowledge carrying with it. But if you look at this picture, you already know how it probably is going to happen mostly. It could be in Frankfurt or Asia. So this has nothing to do with border climate or our tradition locally or even in Arctic areas. So what's going on at the moment, if you just observe calmly, you will see that the things that are planned now already here on this new area of Bodø, of course they are just plans so far, but it is very hard to quickly to see how the tradition or the knowledge there or such is going on, but there's still plenty of time, so I believe that there's time to influence this and at least make some kind of diversity in the solutions, because this is the key. I think we just have to allow different types of designs to emerge and test things. But what is good with heritage is to see that some things have been tested already and they function already, so we should take that information with us. And my big frustration sometimes overspilling to my nearest and dearest is that we are kind of limiting our huge material and availability to information and diversity into a very narrow field of constructing shelters and homes and working places in a certain manner, and knowing that that's not the right way to do it at the same time. And we have never pledged any kind of promise to anyone that we have to do it that way. So it's very interesting that the conformity keeps us acting in a certain manner. So this is just some pictures of some areas in the world where things are done in different manners. And we could study those and just inform ourselves a little bit more about how we could do something else instead of the most obvious solutions. My personal strategy, together with also Pasi here, has been to carry out teaching where we teach future architects how to use tools and make very simple small buildings in a very short time, and kind of engaging people into the act of construction, and in this way empowering them to understand that they actually can fix their buildings if it's made with a simple manner and a local material. And then you even can, if the plumber doesn't come immediately, you can do it yourself in a way. And we have done these workshops quite a lot already, so there's thousands of architects already acting who have been working with their hands with very simple tools, solving a very simple problem and getting some of these pros that are happening when you are building together. So I'm kind of also thinking that we are, in the end, we are quite simple animals, that we like to work together and experience things together, and then the discussions and learning becomes much better, and the results are owned by the people who build them, so they also take better care of those structures afterwards. This has been said already here before. So these are just some things that we have observed happen, both for the students and the local people, and everybody learns together. And I often say that in our case here in the north, the wood is the democratic material, because you don't need to own very complex tools either, or place to work. So you are kind of empowered to change the world with your own hands. In 2 weeks' time, you can make a building that can serve up to 100 years if you do it correctly. It's amazing small input with a big influence on the society, really. And then I stole some slides from a previous seminar. I was, hence the hairstyle here. Just showing quickly why wood also is good, but we know this already. If you look at how much energy you put in the production of this, any material, what's shown here, and what kind of strength do you get out of it. It's very simple to see that wood is in the very sweet spot over there. Of course, you can technically approach to these areas too, so there are some promising other things too going on, but also stone and brick are very interesting materials, you can see. And then the discussion about CO2, of course, is kind of in the media a lot, and you can just see how wood is winning hands down this competition, no matter what the concrete industry says here in Bodo or elsewhere in the world. So concrete is just something that we have to use a bit sparsely, and so is steel. But with steel you can do the recycling, end-of-life recycling approach. If there would be some systems, it could help quite a lot already. With concrete it's much harder, because everybody knows it's very heavy material, and we made one project here recycling concrete elements from the military, and the transportation already was so expensive, and because they weigh tons each. So that's also the last time we do that. And also wood in this case is just good for the people and nature, so it's at the same time good for both. It benefits everybody. So we We would like this to happen also here locally. It already happens in some areas of the world where the whole chain is working together to make a culture of wood where locally you can have all these things. You have the raw materials, you have the makers, caretakers, designers. Everybody knows what they are doing because you have to accumulate the information by learning by doing these things to see how, and of course then adding the information from the traditional architecture or design or carpeting. So we have done this kind of workshops. I just show quickly how it looks like when the future architects are using hand tools and discussing and detailing while they are working and creating, like in this case, a public space in the middle of Vienna in 10 days for all kind of happenings and cooking outside. So it remained there afterwards. Or this port wine bar in Portugal that we also made in a short time with students who have never built anything really before from Italy, but they learned quickly. So we all have an innate skill and even need, you could say, to do something like this together to make a mark. And so it's a kind of win-win. You create an ecological structure, teach people, and at the same time there's a small change kind of happening, which is adding biodiversity on the area. And yeah, happiness prevails. And then in our own office we have also designed and built stuff, and also then it comes to the idea. What is the idea of the project? And we try to look at the local climate and tradition, but the climate is very interesting because if you take the same climate around the whole world, you start seeing similarities in ways of solving problems in similar places, like Arctic islands, wooden architecture. It's a nice thing to write on the Google and see what happens, because for some reason everywhere from Aleutian Islands, the Yupik and to Greenland, they seem to all agree that it's good to put the buildings quite close to each other, so you create some kind of microclimate. So instead of making big buildings that house everything inside, you can make some kind of grouping of almost like animals standing, like penguins or something like that. And then you create these nice spots always. No matter what the direction of the wind is, you can always place yourself accordingly to the kind of nooks and crannies of your small village. So this client also was asking for one building in the beginning, but we managed to work with him and come to a solution where we can divide it like into some kind of fishing village in the end. Picture by Pasi Aalto. And even adding some old knowledge from Sami Njalla storage building also as a kind of statement of the long history of the area. And another project we used the idea and just dressed it in a totally new task was or is a salt project, which is currently in Oslo Harbour, where we were using the fish drying racks as an idea. It was a very simple construction that can take tons of fish. So it should have taken a very big storm as well on the coast, but it actually was the first tryout was blown away by a storm. So this, the one in Oslo, is standing now. At the same time, we were doing different kind of tests that were based on the idea of nomadic culture. So we had one Sami artist, Juar Nang, also working with us to make a kind of modern Sami solutions for tents for people. But this nomadic structure had to move by modern means this time, so that's why it can be staged in Oslo afterwards. So again, the idea is the shape and the form and the materiality, but now it's housing contemporary art and food and music in Oslo, and in sauna, of course. That's always in the program. So this was the big sauna that was on the island here near to us. And the whole point being this, that now when it's in Oslo, it's you notice the other houses, they have a bit different style and materiality and recyclability perhaps than our structure. So it's about biodiversity. I'm not saying that this is wrong type of architecture. Both of these houses on the background work very well in their purpose, but then it's very nice to have a North Norwegian fishing rack full of life and all kind of microcultures meeting there. So it's about engagement and making these small situations too, where actually primeval things happen. There's fire and water and people are bathing naked together. There's one person sitting here in the audience who is doing the same trick in Bodo at the moment in a collection of small houses on the coast that house a sauna as well. And then the next project was in Trondheim with the same principle, some of them floating as well. But always material being wood and the scale being something that can be repaired and bringing people in it and experience that this works, and in a big scale too, because I think the scale is one of the issues here in traditional architecture, that we can kind of scale up some things like this, which is a very interesting idea. So we have to try something else, and I made a sketch for Bodø Klimt some years ago where I proposed a stadium which is turf roofed and half buried underground, and I saw it was used once in a press conference, but it never came about. So I still would maintain that we should have a local stadium in a turf house rather, just big enough. But so this type of camouflaging using the terrain is very obvious in Arctic climate, and they had to do this. They had to go halfway underground and then put the ground that you dig up on top of the house, and then there you are, warm. And then you were just imitating nature actually, because the bigger the bird, the deeper it goes into the snow. So that's how it looks like when a big capercaillie is sleeping. It's just the head popping out. And I think our architecture in the Arctic could be a bit like this sometimes as well. So we were using this kind of approach a little bit in a couple of projects, not going underground because it was very hard rock, but trying to hide like a bird or an animal. And this is one island in front of, not Bodø, a bit more south in Meløy kommune called Karlsholmen in the middle of the ocean. And the client wanted to have a place where you can overnight and have a sauna. So we were, it was shown here how the prevailing wind directions work and so on, but we were living on this island altogether 5 weeks and building this project ourselves. So we were observing how the wind behaves and turned our back towards west in the end, because normally you would say that you should turn your building kind of belly side towards the south to get the warm sun and everything, but when you are on the island you realize that the wind is the bigger factor, so you have to turn your back to the wind and actually turn your opening somewhere else. And there was some building already before on the island, fire lighthouse, and the lighthouse is of course has to be visible because of the function, you have to see it, but ours could hide, so you see ours on the left side between the rocks there. So we were finding the only spot on the island which doesn't get the waves, so you can see it from the vegetation, or the tidal waves doesn't come there in the storm, and also the place where you can hide against the wind. And then we were placing again not one building but a group of buildings that are creating these small corners where you can still be if it's 50 meters a second. And all the buildings are so low that you can't stand inside them because you anyhow sleep in them or sit in the sauna, so it's obvious you don't need to go to a normal height. This is not tech shitton, but in this case we could do it. And everything is built of one material only, and this is wood, 2 by 8 mostly. and in the middle there's a fireplace as well. Today it looks more like this because of the coloring, of course, so it's much better hidden also in the area. So of course the scale is small here, but I'm kind of thinking that this could be one way to act in the new By area as well, to make buildings that are creating even more interesting in-between spaces and placing themselves according to wind and sun. And then we built a sauna just a couple of months ago in Svartisen, which was supposed to have a new hotel on the other side, designed by Snöhet. That was kind of donut hanging on the water, but just a couple of days ago I read from the newspaper that that project is now buried because of the funding issues there, which I applaud a little bit too, because I think that kind of activity next to such a vulnerable nature is really dangerous, with the Salmon River and all running next to it. So we were trying to do a bit differently. This is by the local municipality, this project. So we try to hide the building, like the roof is a turf roof, and it connects to hilltops, and the building is like in between the hilltops, more or less. Just leaving some space for the firewood and chilling under the roof. And then we blended the color also from the local soil and some ashes, so it has the same color than the soil, to hide it as much as possible, but still give all the spaces that you need for a sauna under it. So it's a kind of bridge between two hilltops, and under that is the sauna. And one more example of local tradition is a recently opened spa in Finland we have designed. And this area is in East Finland, where the normal way of inhabiting the forest really is to make a group of buildings on top of a hilltop. So this kind of hilltop courtyards were common. So you have a group of houses, and even though you are a little bit windy, you have much better view and sun conditions, and the wind in East Finland is not so cold as on the coast of Norway, so you don't need to worry so much about that. While the low sun in the winter is warming the houses very well when you are in the hilltop. And also the cold weather, like you know, in Bejan especially, you have the same phenomena. It's -18 in the bottom of the valley and -5 on the mountaintop, which somehow doesn't make sense, but so it's warmer there, and it looks like this. And we were trying to take this idea into our project as well, so we again managed to split the program into several small pieces, so we can create this kind of mountaintop settlement rather than a big multi-story hotel spa, which is the normal way of doing this. Like here in Rönnvik, you have the hotel coming up on the mountaintop, which is kind of exposing itself to the winds of coastal Norway, and also is not creating any microclimates, but on the opposite actually. So the idea was that you have a kind of the most sensitive space, a microclimate is the inner courtyard between the buildings, where you are basically naked, bathing outdoors even in the winter. And there's one cold and one hot pool, and then you have these glimpses of the forest in between the buildings rather. And even the cottages that are now not hotel rooms but cottages, they also are grouped very close to each other, so they try to create microclimate. And final example is what we work at the moment is a spa, very big spa in Bucharest, and some old sketches, not current ones, where we are trying to create a village, again a kind of Romanian village along a water body, instead of a big hall with kind of big spans and one climate inside. We are trying to put people out, because this is about saunas, so you have to cool down and have the hot one, so about contrasts as well. So at the moment we are working with this kind of grouping of houses where they are creating again a safe courtyard where you can come from the saunas and bathe in the middle. but the roof angles and materials and everything is taken from even the canopies that are cantilever in Romanian traditional architecture. But still, the experiences we are trying to offer to people could be called primeval. So you go into this kind of conditions where we try to use really only natural materials from the floor to the ceiling and natural light, so people kind of can travel in their minds somewhere else than in a modern spa, maybe, we hope. And on this list I would point out Jared Diamond's The World Until Yesterday, What Can We Learn from Traditional Societies, as a very nice reading for everybody, really, because it is a balanced expression of what I'm trying to say in my lecture in architecture as well. And also Robert Polk Harrison's Forest, The Shadow of Civilization is very interesting reading, saying that forests is not only a kind of biotype and nature, it's also part of our cultural heritage, because our temples and spaces of architecture, they come from forest, and they imitate the forest space and so on and so forth. Very interesting reading. But yeah, thank you for patience. And I'm sorry I used my 30 minutes, so there's no time for questions. Yeah.
Well, it was perfect. Thank you so much, Sami. Questions and comments?
Hello, Tarmo, my name. We are also busy with ecological materials, and I ask about paradigm. If you are speaking about forests, you like forests, you want to keep them, but you need to cut them to have your wooden material. How you are dealing with that paradigm, and isn't it easy to reuse wooden material in future, maybe?
Yeah, the first one is easy to answer. I think there's no problem in capacity of forest producing enough building material for us if it's gardened efficiently. And I think there was a fantastic lecture many years ago by one Finnish ecological philosophist where he said that we have to garden as much as we construct, and this is the key. So with good design and good gardening. It was the slide I showed about the forest owners, sawmills, the chain of how things would be happening. There would be no problem in having everything we need from the forest. So I don't believe nature being a kind of museum which you can't touch, because everything comes from nature. Everything we wear and everything. So it's just about how we do it and have a more planned kind of material flows. And of course, yeah, recycling wood is quite not only easy because it doesn't request very complex tools. It's also very satisfying when you do it, and you maybe use a planer on an old piece of wood. Under it is like new wood. It's just 1 millimeter, which is old. You can think like that. It's more about the kind of combination of not having it when you need it, and also the fact that you have to use workforce to professionally take down the material. So I believe very much in the fact that we should keep the buildings and not start dismantling them into materials, because that's already the first part of the problem. So you need to just fix them where they stand. We have enough space to let them be and own another place where you have to build this new thing or make a new wing. We have now a client in Säringe where we have a body of a building that is kept and fixed, and it has a new wing attached to it that solves the other kind of problems, and there's a very good solution both, and it's not either or.
I have one question.
Okay.
That actually both architecture, new architecture in the environment, historic environment, trying to blend in there using the materials, but then it comes the contrast. Do you use contrast principle too, and what about the black color? And as it comes to these Finnish, because you have mosquitoes there in East Finland, it is very useful to have it on the top of the hill, because otherwise you're all full of mosquitoes. So small wind there is good. But yes, exactly about the color, because in Fleinvær, for example, these grey ones are absolutely perfect because they are like the harbor and port and all this kind of like. But then there is this black building that you made a project too, and it is like in the contrast. Did you play with the contrast principle there too, or you try to blend in somehow, and you think that black color is blending in too? Or?
Is this in Fleinvær, this black building?
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one is it.
Yeah, but basically black color as such. Yeah.
Architecture is so many things that color is one, and form and everything. In color, I think I remember my professor a long time ago who has wrote many books about preservation of houses, old houses. He said that the worst thing you often can do to a building is to paint it ecologically, because the paint is like, if it's not made of good raw materials, which usually has to be done yourself, then it's just dipping the whole balance of the ecology of the building. So if you don't need that color, just the wood doesn't need it. So there's no paint almost that helps the wood to stay better, actually. And black is probably the worst one, because the sun is kind of eating into the wood material much worse than a light color. So there's a kind of black period of architecture which should end pretty quickly if it's about woods, and I have done those mistakes myself too. So I have a house which is half black, half white, maybe part of my own head, and the white paint on the building, which I wouldn't do anymore, is like new after 12 years. And the black is totally worn out because the heat exchange is killing the paint and the wood. So learning by doing.
I'm going to follow that discussion. In Heritage, we have design solutions to these problems, but we've moved so far into having technical solutions. So we do let's say, not a bad design, but we do a design that is very dependent on chemical and technical solutions all the way. So this is about roof eaves, but it's also just, orienting the building, doing all these things right. The other part, which I think is maybe has to be done, is we do really have to move to the discussion of what should be the local architecture of Kärringøy in 2050, instead of importing architectural designs from everywhere and saying that this is new and fancy and spotless. We should really focus on developing that architectural tradition based on the local culture, and that way I think we would find that we have plenty of resources. A really good example now is wool, the use of sheep wool, which we throw away. We plow it into the ground because we're not using it. We have plenty of it because we eat sheep. So really understanding the material flows and understanding what can we try out, how can we test things out. We're not testing out enough yet. We should be doing more.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thank you again, and